Sexual abuse when you're dealing with a narcissist comes in different stages. In the beginning, you've got your love bombing stage, and that's when they will just want to claim you. They'll say that you belong to them, that you're beautiful, that you're smart, that you're intelligent, that you're handsome, that you're gorgeous, that you are completely everything that they've ever wanted in a partner. And so how can you resist? How can you resist their charm in the beginning? But that love bombing stage is actually a way of claiming you as their property. And once they've brought you into their lair, then the devaluing starts. And that's when you start seeing these little things about how you are in the bedroom is wrong in some way. That maybe you're selfish, maybe that you're too promiscuous, maybe that you're wearing the wrong clothes, maybe that you were talking to the wrong people. You know, the control then starts setting in, because the love bombing is really just a way of gathering you into their layer of control. The next stage that you'll see is jealousy and rages. And this is where they'll start demanding to know everything they need to know, or they think they need to know, about your past partners, about the kinds of sexual encounters that you may have had before. What did you do with that person? Who was it? Who did you talk to? When were you with them? What did you wear? All these sorts of things. The jealousy and the rages then start. And if you tell them that they're being irrational or that they're crazy, then that's going to, boom, inflame them, because that narcissistic injury will be triggered and the narcissistic rage will come flying out. So you can't say that, because that's going to be perceived to them as disrespectful or a criticism. Even if they are totally crazy, there's nothing to be jealous about. There's nothing to worry about. Part of this jealousy phase is also being jealous of anyone or anything that seems to interfere with your attention toward them. They want to have full attention. So even if it's your children, if you have children with somebody else, or your parents or your best friend, they want full attention. And they will not accept it if they don't get your full attention. The next phase is coercion tactics. And with coercion tactics, what you'll start to see is demanding sex at certain times, demanding sex after an argument so that you can prove their commitment back to them. Demanding sex after an incident when they think that you've been talking to somebody that you shouldn't have, or that you were wearing something that you shouldn't have. Then demanding sex to have control back over you with that. Sometimes they play the victim card, where, if you want to prove to them that you love them, prove to them that they're the only one, so that you feel that you have to have sex with them in order to make them feel safe again, to validate them, to make them feel secure. The next stage is threatening infidelity. If you don't give them what they want, if you don't have sex with them in the way they want, if you don't do the things sexually with them that they want you to do, then they might threaten, hey, I'll just go get it somewhere else. Hey, all these other people want me. So, if you don't give it to me, I will find it somewhere else. Another thing that you might see is the pushy stage, where they're trying to push you into doing things that maybe you aren't comfortable with. Maybe you don't want to do because they're not comfortable. Maybe it's something out of your zone that you don't want to do, like a threesome or some, S&M thing, or just even certain positions that you're not comfortable with. Well, then that becomes a threat as well. That it's never enough, that they're pushing you into doing things that you don't necessarily want to do. And if you don't comply, then you are threatened with that they're going to go to somebody else, they're going to lose you, or something like that. And another thing that you'll see with narcissists and sex is unsafe sex. So maybe they will push you into doing things that are not safe, such as having unprotected sex, or having sex where you potentially could get caught, or maybe giving you a sexually transmitted disease. I've actually seen that, as a divorce attorney where, a husband or a wife cheats on the spouse, they go get a sexually transmitted disease, they know that they have it, they've been diagnosed with it, and then they end up going and having sex with their husband or wife then, and giving them that sexually transmitted disease. And in a lot of states, that's actually cause for civil action, such as assault or battery or intentional infliction of emotional distress. Because especially if you end up with something like herpes, you're going to have that virus for the rest of your life. There's no cure for it. There are medications for it, but there's no cure for it. But that's the kind of thing that narcissists will do. Another thing that you'll see with this is that narcissists will maybe withhold sex or withdraw from sex as a way of coercing or controlling their partner. I've actually seen women who will say, I've actually been at lunches where women will say, I stopped having sex with my husband. I told him that I'm not going to have sex with him until he does this thing that I want him to do. That's another way that they use sex as a weapon, as a method of control. And if you're dealing with a malignant narcissist, you might see violence. You might see violent sex. You might see sex that's completely, unsafe. You might see rape, degrading sex, or sadistic sex. And if you think that this is so wrong, give me a so wrong in the comments. And if you are dealing with any of the things that I mentioned in this video, please check out my other videos to help you. One is self-care to cope when dealing with narcissists, and I'll put a link to that below. And another one is Escaping Hell, How to Leave a Narcissist for Good, parts 1 and 2. And I will definitely put links to those videos below as well. And if you're getting ready to negotiate with a narcissist, check out my free Crush My Negotiation Prep Worksheet. I will drop a link to that below as well, but you can just grab it at winmynegotiation.com. Also, it will definitely help you. Do not walk into your negotiation without it. And if you want additional support and you want to connect with other people who are dealing with narcissists, please join my free private Facebook group. It's called Narcissist Negotiators, and I'll drop a link to that below so that you can just click and jump on in there and connect with many others who are dealing with exactly what you are dealing with. What are the kinds of tricks that they pull?
A lot of narcissists really like to use money as a tool for power and control and leverage. And so I think just sometimes just recognizing that it's not about the money and that it's about the power and the control can be helpful in normalizing. In terms of some of the tricks and going along the control theme, a lot of times they have all the access to everything. And so I mean, what I see a fair amount is that translates into they have entire visibility over all of the finances, but then you don't have any access. So they have control over all spending, et cetera, those types of things. And so I think one of the approaches that can be helpful, not necessarily if you're going through divorce, but a little bit before then. And tell me if that's in the right track, but I imagine you probably have people that are contemplating divorce. But
Yeah,
sometimes I think one
perfect.
thing that can be really helpful is if you're able, as you're trying to save the marriage, to convince them to sign up for one of these platforms like a Personal Capital or Mint or things of that nature that have account aggregation, so you can see kind of all of the finances at once. And if you can do it in the way of like, this is really a hot button for me and that we don't have transparency, and so like it'd be really helpful for us to work on our marriage. And so you're still kind of giving them this semblance of control, but that can be a good way to backdoor your way into having visibility over all the finances, at least with what they're willing to add to the Personal Capital account. So that's something that I find can be kind of pretty effective there.
Well, those are both really, really good. Really, really good. I was just thinking, hiding money, they tend to, be the ones that'll move money offshore or put it in separate accounts or get paid in cash. And what happens is they've been working on their target for so long that the target ends up,
kind of feeling paranoid anyway, and feeling like the other person has all the control. And so they kind of have this imagination that there's all this stuff going on, and it may not be as bad as they might think, but they just imagine all the worst things, like, you know, there's millions of dollars offshore, or there's millions of dollars being paid in cash, and you know, their income is 5 times what they say it is. And um, you know, so I think part of it is, um, you know, just kind of looking at the facts, and also saying, okay, you know, in today's day and age, it's not as easy to hide money, and money usually has a trail. You know, you can usually see wires going places. I mean, it's really hard to move money around without some kind of tracing, traceability. um you know, I mean, there's going to be some weird wire to some bank in the Cayman Islands or Nevis or something that you're going to see, or some big amount of cash that was taken out, and there's no way to account for what happened to it. You know, so that's what I usually tell people. It's kind of, it's not as easy to hide money as people think that it is.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I often suggest for people that, because like you said, people can kind of work themselves into a tizzy where the fear of the unknown becomes this massive problem and kind of manifests into a massive problem that may or may not exist. And so sometimes what I think is the best way to evaluate that relatively quickly, because the decision is primarily, I've got this lingering concern. Am I going to be able to move forward with this lingering concern or not? And so you then have options to address that concern. You can hire a private investigator and do, you know, a world search of different bank accounts and see if something like that comes up. You can do, you know, full forensic accounting and tracing, but all of those things come with pretty hefty price tags. And they also take your case in a direction that can make it really, really difficult to resolve amicably if the event that that is, you know, a possible outcome, which often isn't the case when you're divorcing a narcissist, but in some cases, you know, that does work. And so, you know, something that we often do is like the smoking gun analysis, which doesn't get to any, it's not a full tracing, but it's more just trying to look at all financial records for a year and do a real rounded corners that say, how much did we make? What happened in terms of the return on investment? And does it make sense for us to be where we're at? Because at the end of the day, your starting balance and your ending balance, the difference between those two are going to be based on gains or losses during that period, total income, less total expenses. So when you do that kind of smoking gun analysis and you look and you see how much in expenses does this imply that we had, is that in the ballpark? So, you know, if you look at it and you say, I think we're spending 15 or 20,000 a month, and then you look at this type of analysis and it's showing 50 or 60,000 in implied expenses, then maybe there's something there that should cause you to do a real deeper dive, you know, ask for 6 years of documents, bring in a private investigator, go further down. So that's often what we do. We call it kind of the smoking gun analysis of just trying to do it a little bit, kind of a
Kind of like a
half-assed
back end way.
approach, right?
Y-
Poor man's
Yeah,
way.
you
But it's
back your way
going on.
into it. I like that approach. That's good. You know, and another thing, which is kind of like similar to what you were just saying, is like, if the person is paid all from one source, like a company, and the person is not paid in cash, you know, maybe there's a C-level executive of some sort, but maybe they do get paid in many different ways. Maybe it's, you know, restricted stock units, or maybe it's, um, you know, I've had C-level executives that get paid in, you know, various, like one was an Indian owned company that the guy was like living in Brazil, but he worked for the American portion of the company. And so like some of his retirement stuff was in rubles, and then some of it was in like Brazilian rios, and some of it was in American dollars. And so, but it all came from one source, the company. And so, one of the things that I've done is subpoena the company and say, give us a breakdown of every single dollar this person has earned, or every single, bonus or stock or whatever. And, where did it go? Which bank accounts did this person direct it to go into? Give us the exact checking account, routing number, the bank name, because you go right to the source and figure out, okay, how much was made. And, okay, here are the expenses. And so here's how much should be left over here. What's missing here?
Yeah. I think to that point, I think step one is really understanding the compensation structure. Subpoenas
Right.
often are a more efficient way of getting to the bottom of things if you don't have full disclosure, or you often will get a very organized packet back from the company as opposed to bankers' boxes of documents that have been pieced together. So in some ways it can actually be more efficient. It does take things in a little different slant. But the other thing that I think is really important is that people get educated, because to your point, I don't think that I think a lot of people don't necessarily have a full understanding of how things like RSUs and stock options and how much people pay in taxes. And so, like, I've seen plenty of situations where someone said, "Hey, I think my husband's hiding money. Look, like here it says that 1,000 RSUs vest, and I only see 400 shares in the account." Well, 400 of them were withheld for taxes. And then I see that you sold 200 shares. And so a lot of times there actually is a good explanation. And so
Absolutely.
trying to get educated, and stock options are another great one, because sometimes there's actually no money that came into the account. It might just have been an outflow because you exercised the options but didn't sell. So yeah, those are really,
or maybe they haven't even vested yet. Maybe they won't vest for another 5 years. And if the person isn't with the company in 5 years, they're not going to even get them. So if they're not ripe, then maybe they're not even something that would be put into the pot to be divided. So I mean, there's that. But I think what happens is people get caught up in the cash element of things a lot of times. But it's like, do you want to spend $10,000 on a forensic accountant to recover 5,000 or whatever? I mean, How much cash are we really talking about a lot of times?
And the other thing
unless
that
they're,
I think one of the other tricks that a lot of people do is put a bank account actually in their spouse's name. That's the other thing that I've seen happen quite a bit. And then
or a new significant other, or their brother, or their parent, or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But in particular in their spouse's name, because then usually they actually have full access and control to it because they were the one that said.
Well,
no.
I'm thinking in a divorce situation, if they're not liking their spouse very much at that moment.
So am I. This is so one of the one of the private investigators.
I mean, but then it's easier for them to get access to it. So I'm saying, like, they put it in a place where, hey, that's my mother's account. I can't touch that. That's that's her money.
Well, no, they have no idea about it. So this way, it's a way for them to get away from I was the one that hid money, because they're almost placing it more.
Oh yeah.
You're the one that was.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think people do quite a bit in terms of just the financial abuse is you need to be cognizant if you drive a Tesla. Anything that has a computer in it can be a tracking device. And used to triangulate in terms of location, which is part of kind of that financial control dynamic.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
I want to get real. Sometimes it's hard to have a conversation about abuse and about emotional abuse in particular. I mean, a lot of times people only really want to talk about certain types of abuse, and emotional abuse, especially when you are in a toxic situation. I've practiced law for a long time, and they talk about no fault divorce, and people like fault doesn't matter and all that sort of thing. And first of all, I want to dispel a myth, because a lot of times people think, well, no fault divorce means fault never matters. And that is definitely a myth, because no fault just means that you don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce. Like years ago, you had to prove fault in order to get a divorce. No fault means is you just don't have to prove fault in order to get a divorce. Years ago, you had to have certain grounds like abandonment or something like that. Now you just have to say irretrievably broken or whatever. But it doesn't mean fault never matters. Fault can come into play for sure. There are times that fault can come into play. Now, emotional abuse is a little bit more tricky, though, because it is much harder to prove in a divorce situation. And suffice it to say, emotional abuse is certainly abuse for sure. And there are times that you can weave it into a case, especially if you can look at it in terms of a custody statute or something like that. We will make sure that we put the domestic violence hotline below for any of you guys. I want to make sure that all of you guys have access to that number, and please make sure you take advantage of using it if you think that you are in an abusive situation, okay? So what the domestic violence hotline says is, maybe in an emotionally or verbally abusive relationship, if your partner attempts to exert control by, number one, calling you names, insulting you, or constantly criticizing you. So that is emotional abuse, number one. Number two is acting jealous, possessive, or refusing to trust you. So that is another way that you can be considered to be in a emotionally or verbally abusive relationship. Okay. Especially if somebody is constantly accusing you of doing things just for no reason whatsoever. And I remember one time I had this client, she almost literally looked like a nun. She was this older woman who would wear these cardigan sweaters, like buttoned up to her neck. And she had this short gray hair, and she would not wear any makeup. And her husband was this Middle Eastern physician who had been very, very successful. But she was so sweet and prim and proper. Literally, if she just, spoke to another male, because the other male would say hello to her in an elevator or something, he would accuse her of having an affair with this other male. I mean, he was so paranoid and so ridiculously, insanely jealous. That was so emotionally abusive. So acting jealous like that in a way that's just not rational can be very, very emotionally abusive to you. Okay. The next one is isolating you from family or friends or other people in your life. You're not allowed to make phone calls at a certain time, or you're not allowed to go see people at a certain time. I remember knowing somebody one time where the husband would actually take note of how many miles were on the car and wouldn't let her drive. That's so emotionally abusive. That's the next one. The next one is monitoring your activities with or without your knowledge, including demanding to know where you go, who are you in contact with, how you spend your time, constantly monitoring you, putting a GPS on your car, things like that. Why do they need to do that? Constantly controlling you, knowing where you are. The next one, attempting to control what you wear, including clothes, makeup, or hairstyles. I remember having a client one time where she had been married to a malignant narcissist, and she talked about when they finally got back together, she had left him. And then when she got back together with him and she thought he had changed, and they were going to therapy, and they were getting ready to go to dinner one night, and under her breath,
he said something about, lipstick. Made a comment about the fact that she was wearing lipstick. Like that was so bad. The fact that she was wearing lipstick at all, somehow she was supposed to feel like bad about that in some way, like she was some sort of, slut or something. The fact that she had lipstick on, that's another one. The next one is humiliating you in any way, especially in front of others. Just horrible. Any kind of humiliation in front of others is bad. Nothing more needs to be even said about that. Next one is gaslighting you by pretending not to understand or refusing to listen to you, questioning your recollection of facts, events, or sources, trivializing your need if you have feelings, or denying your previous statements. Anytime somebody says, if you feel like you have needs and you're saying, this is the way you feel, and they say, that's not the way you feel, or if they're saying, oh, that's ridiculous, or that's not what you're seeing, or anytime somebody is making you feel like you're crazy, that's gaslighting. Refusing to listen to you, that's gaslighting. Making jokes about you that are hurtful, and then saying that you can't take a joke, your butt is fat or whatever. Oh, you can't take a joke. Those kinds of things are hurtful. You see a text message exchange between your significant other and somebody of the opposite sex, and it looks suggestive, and you ask them about it, and they say, oh, you're reading too much into it. You're probably not. That sort of thing. So that's gaslighting. Next one is threatening you, your children, your family, or your pets with or without weapons. Any kind of threatening. If you do this, this is going to happen. You better stop it. Where you feel in fear, you're worried for your safety, you're worried that something's going to happen. Never okay. Absolutely never okay. Damaging your belongings, including throwing objects, punching walls, kicking doors. Never okay. If your property gets destroyed, things get broken, that's just absolutely never okay. Blaming you for abusive behavior, again, never okay. I go back to a Maya Angelou quote, which was always so perfect. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Okay. And then when they try to say they're sorry, it's like that narcissist faux apology. It's probably a bunch of crap. And I have a whole video on what narcissists really mean when they say they're sorry. And you can definitely check that out. Probably sorry, not sorry. Don't believe them. Stand in your power. And, you can put that in the comments. I stand in my power. Put that in the comments right now. I stand in my power. Okay. Next one is accusing you of cheating, or cheating themselves and blaming you for their actions. That projection and deflection, or lying and denying, always narc moves. All right. Or cheating to intentionally hurt you, and then threatening to cheat again to suggest they're better than you. They're always going after better forms of supply. You know that, right? You know that they can get their better forms of supply to try to put you in your place. And then the last one is telling you that you're so lucky to be with them. And I have a whole video, by the way, on narcissists' favorite catchphrases, which you can definitely check out. That's, one of the things that they'll say, like, you're so lucky to be with me. When they say stuff like that, it's just so ridiculous. Don't believe things like that. You'll never find somebody else as good as me. You'll never find anybody else who loves you as much as me. Those are phrases designed to try to control you, okay? Those are all things to try to manipulate you, destabilize you, to keep you under their thumb, because they have no sense of self. And so they're trying to keep you in their power. All right. So those are all signs of emotional abuse. Some people I know who are watching this have probably seen a lot of them, maybe even all of them.
If that's you, for sure, definitely take advantage of calling that hotline. So, narcissistic parental alienation, what does that mean? So, parental alienation in general means the psychological manipulation of one parent against the other to the child by causing the child to reject, disdain, hate the other parent in a very complete way, that child actually ends up feeling like the other parent is the enemy, is disgusting, is horrible. Okay, so that's parental alienation. What narcissistic parental alienation is when you have this alienating parent who also happens to be a narcissist. It's probably the most lethal, toxic, horrible situation that you could possibly have. So before I get into what you can do about it, let me give you some indicators that maybe parental alienation may be going on for you. So number one is that they send poisonous messages to the child about what we call the targeted parent. And they portray the targeted parent as unloving, unsafe, unavailable, things like that. So they're manipulating the child into believing that this parent, who even maybe once was very loving, into believing that this person is now hates you, that hates the child, and that the environment is unsafe, that the parent doesn't want the child, something like that. So they send these poisonous messages to start basically brainwashing the child into believing how horrible the targeted parent is. Okay, so the second thing that they do is they start limiting contact and communication between the child and the targeted parent. They'll start saying that the child doesn't want to come over to your house, that the child is too tired, that the child is sick, that the child has homework, anything that they can dream up. They start limiting that contact, limiting that communication. They'll even start saying things like, or the cell phone wasn't working, or the battery died, or I shut it off because I don't want you tracking me, something like that. So they start limiting communication between the child and the targeted parent. So the number thing that they do is erasing and replacing the targeted parent in the heart and mind of the child. So they basically will start saying that, this is your new daddy, this is your new mommy, or we don't need old daddy in our life anymore. We don't need new mommy in our life anymore. You have me. I'm the only one that you can count on. I'm the only one who's here for you all the time. Daddy or mommy, whoever the targeted parent is, doesn't want you. And besides, they never wanted you. And you're just a bother in their life. And I'm the one who loves you. I'm the one who wants to be with you all the time. Things like that. So they start replacing and erasing the targeted parent. So the number 4 thing that they do is encourage the child to betray the target parent's trust. So in other words, they'll have the child spy on the targeted parent and get back to the alienating parent. What's going on in daddy's house? What's going on in mommy's house? What are you doing over there? Tell me what's happening. Tell me what you had for dinner. Tell me if daddy or mommy is seeing someone else. Tell me what you're seeing in the house, things like that. So basically they become this little like spy for the other parent, so that the other parent, the alienating parent, has more ammunition to use against the targeted parent. And the last thing they do is they undermine the authority of the targeted parent. And how they do that is they say, the targeted parent might say, no, you're not allowed to go out till 3 o'clock in the morning with your boyfriend. And then the alienating parent will say, no, you can go ahead and do that. Daddy or mommy is stupid, or they don't know, or they're not the boss of you, I am, things like that. So they'll undermine the other parent's authority. And I do want to mention that a lot of what I'm getting today is from Dr. Amy Baker, who is the author of the book Co-Parenting with the Toxic Ex. I've had the
pleasure of being able to interview her. She is the foremost authority on parental alienation in the world. And I will drop a link to my last interview with her in the description below so that you can check that out if you'd like to as well. And I will also drop a link actually to her book, Co-Parenting with the Toxic Ex, if you want to be able to check that out also. So, you may see one or two of these things happening with you, but, every parent, when they're in the middle of a divorce or in the middle of breaking up or something like that, they engage in some of these things. So, if you just see one or two, it may not be parental alienation. It's the whole, when they're all taken together, then these parental alienation strategies foster conflict, and they create that psychological distance between the child and the targeted parent. And that's what it is that they want. And sometimes it's just because they hate the targeted parent, they want to punish them. Sometimes it's just because they want the kids to love them more. And especially if they're a narcissist, they want to feed their ego. They want to show the targeted parent that I've got you, I got the kids to turn against you. That is one thing that narcissists do anyway, is triangulate and try to gather a support team and get people to go against you. And so in the middle of a divorce, they do that with the children and with anyone else that they can get on their side as well, unfortunately. If these things are resonating with you, just drop a comment down below. You can write Stop PAS, which is Stop Parental Alienation Syndrome, or you can just drop a comment and let me know, yeah, nailed it. This is exactly spot on. Unfortunately, this is way more prevalent than we think. Okay, so what can you do about it? Number one thing that you can do about it is do something ASAP. The thing is that when it's gone all the way to where the child is fully alienated, absolutely hates the other parent, then it's so hard to turn that around. I've seen some of the worst possible cases. I've actually had clients that have had to go to parental alienation camps, reunification camps with their children so that they can try to reunify. You're basically deprogramming the children at this point. It's almost like as if they've been in a cult. So it's really, really difficult. So if you are seeing any of these signs, do something immediately, get help, and make sure that you are considering your strategies and your interventions absolutely right away. Don't brush it off. Don't say, well, she was angry or he was angry, or we're just going through a divorce, or I'll get the kids back at some point. Just be really, really mindful of doing something as soon as you can at the beginning of the process. The second thing that you can do is don't engage. And what I mean by that is, first of all, you're not going to engage at the level that the narcissistic alienating parent wants you to. I have a whole video on how to negotiate with a narcissist ex, where I talk about the BIF method, brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And I will drop a link to that video below as well. You're definitely going to want to check that out, but you don't want to engage, and don't employ the same tactics with the children that the other parent is employing. Parental alienation is a form of child abuse, and I want to make sure that I say that. I've had Dr. Amy Baker actually said that it's harder for children to get over parental alienation syndrome than it is sexual abuse. It's that traumatic. So, children of parental alienation syndrome who've been targeted, who are the victims of that, have anxiety, depression, their grades suffer. They sometimes have eating disorders. They sometimes drop out of school. They have a higher incidence of teen pregnancy. They have a higher incidence of being on drugs, all kinds of really, really bad things, because this is a form of child abuse. So don't respond by engaging in the same type of behavior. Just keep letting the children know that you're there for them, that you want to see them, that you love them, that the problems with the other parent have nothing to do with them. Just keep letting them know that even though they say they hate you or whatever, it still goes in there. They still see it. They still hear it. as much as they don't communicate that with you. So just don't stop telling your child that you love them, but don't engage with the other parent. And the last thing that you can do is make sure that you have a really, really strong support team. You're definitely going to want to have a lawyer that understands parental alienation, one that has had experience in dealing with parental alienation. And then you're going to want to hire or get involved with, hire a good coach or a therapist or somebody who really knows parental alienation, and also get involved with some support groups, other people who have dealt with it, and not people that are going to like kind of help you on the hate wave, because that's not really going to help you. So what you really want is somebody who can give you information, advice on how they were able to reunify with their children.
Flying monkeys. Flying monkeys are a big part of what narcissists use. And especially when you're looking at negotiating with narcissists, which is what I specialize in, they use their flying monkeys for all sorts of things. So, what is a flying monkey and why do they need them? What do they use them for? So, a flying monkey is a third party. They could have one or they could have multiples of these flying monkeys, but it's a third party that narcissists use to inflict abuse upon their target. So they're lining up these people to try to help them abuse you. And most often, the flying monkeys really have no idea that they're being used as a pawn in their whole entire scheme to try to make you, the target, feel worse. So, while I'm going to go a little bit more into the flying monkey thing, I just wanted to run over here and give a little check and see where you guys are calling in from and who we have here. So, and remember that I'm going to do the Q&A again on Tuesday at noon. So you'll want to make sure that you check that out as well. But if you guys have any stories about flying monkeys, I'd love to hear that, and just go ahead and give that to me in the chat. So I'm checking that out now. So I see somebody here from London. Hi, Sully from Florida. Deborah from Arkansas. Thanks for joining in on me. So I want to hear, have you guys been dealing with flying monkeys? So flying monkey, the term actually came from the Wizard of Oz. And the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch had her flying monkeys around her when she was in her like little lair or whatever she was in. And they didn't really have any thought. They just lined up with the Wicked Witch. And so that's what narcissists do. They line up these people so that you, the target, either think that you're the only one that thinks this way, because that's one of the things that narcissists use to kind of control you, is to say, you're the only one that thinks that. And so they will line up these flying monkeys to believe what they believe, so that it reinforces the fact that you're the only one that thinks that way. You're the only one that believes that. You're the only one that doesn't see how great they are. You're the only one that doesn't see how generous they are. You're the only one that doesn't have respect for them. That sort of thing. So they either are lined up and aligned with the narcissist and just thinking that the narcissist person is wonderful, or they are being used in a sense that they also think that there's something wrong with you. So they try to turn these people against you. And very often they use people that they know like you, or or that you like, or that you respect. And sometimes they'll even have this person, like it could be somebody close to you. Like, when I was dealing with a couple of narcissists in my life, one of the narcissists actually had my cousin come to me and say, oh, why don't you try to give her a chance? And, obviously my cousin didn't know the whole story of what was going on. And so here my cousin is being used as a pawn
in this whole narcissistic scheme to try to abuse. And just looking to see how many of you have been dealing. So Annie says, I've been dealing with exes and flying monkeys related to parental alienation, and he is the narcissist. Exactly. So they line you up, their narcissists up to think that you are a bad parent, and sometimes they start this whole campaign of denigration against you long before the divorce happens. Sometimes they start planting these seeds, many months and sometimes even years before you're even onto the idea that divorce may even be an option. So they might start saying things like, oh, so and so had a little too much to drink at the party last night. I'm really worried about her. And this is like maybe 6 months before the divorce even gets started. So that once the divorce starts, that person can go, well, I told you that she had a problem with alcohol. And then they start trying to use that against you as, obviously you're not a fit mother because you have a problem with alcohol. Everybody knows that. I just had a conversation with Carol down the street. She was concerned about you because of your drinking problem. And you're sitting there thinking, I have one glass of wine a week. I don't even know what you're talking about. That sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing that they'll do with their flying monkeys. They use them in their as a pawn in their overall scheme of psychological abuse. And during a divorce or even a breakdown of a partnership or any kind of situation where you're trying to separate yourself with a narcissist, and especially if you're getting ready to go negotiate with a narcissist, they are going to want to use these flying monkeys as a method of leverage against you so that you feel more scared, so that they take more control over the negotiation process. So I'm just looking to see what some of you guys are saying. Anne says that's exactly what he does. Lizzie says, my employees are flying monkeys for my narc husband, so sick. Well, and the employees for a narc husband are a perfect place because they're being paid by that guy. So it behooves them to say, oh, what's going on? Okay, we'll line up and go get behind the person who we are employed by. So now, even if you had a great relationship with your husband's employees, they're like, well, I know my bread is buttered on this side, so sorry, can't talk to you. And then it makes you feel even more alone, more victimized, more isolated, more crazy. It's a method of gaslighting because, here comes these third parties who are saying things to you about what happened in a particular situation, and it didn't happen that way. So you're being gaslighted now, or gaslit, by a third party. So these are like the minions, the henchmen of the whole narcissistic play. And when you are separating from a narcissist in a divorce or a business setting, it even gets worse. It's like they're on steroids. Whatever their worst case scenario was before, it's 100,000 times worse when you're trying to separate out from them, because when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're either for them or you are the enemy. Even when you're in a relationship with them, the slightest little slight is a massive, huge thing, and it all becomes about, you don't respect me, you don't love me, you don't do enough for me, all this stuff. And all you did was say, hey, how come you didn't take out the trash or whatever? It becomes this massive, huge thing. So just imagine now they are no longer getting this narcissistic supply from you, that whatever it was that they felt they were getting from you and why they were in a relationship with you in the first place, that supply source is being threatened. So now they're just coming after you, and they come after you not just themselves, but try to line up people so that they feel that they're bolstering up their ego. And I have this whole army of people who believe what I believe, who think that you're crazy, that I'm amazing, and that you're the one that has the problem. So it's a method to make you feel even worse. So I just volunteered for an insanity test. I go in on Thursday. I'm taking them all to court. Well, taking them to court is probably a good way of turning around that. Remember, I talk about how you want to make sure you're going on the offensive when you're dealing with narcissists. If you are in a situation where you're divorcing a narcissist, or you're trying to dissolve a business partnership or negotiate with a narcissist in any format, you're going to constantly feel like you're on the defensive, constantly feel like they're coming after you, and all you can do is like deal with that fire and that fire and that fire and that fire, and you don't stop to breathe. It's almost foreign to you to think, oh, I can actually have a strategy here and turn this around. I can actually go on the offensive and have them be the one defending themselves. It's such a foreign concept, because throughout the entire relationship, they've tried to exert this coercive control over you and have you almost believing, like as if you're in a cult or something, like that you can't ever get what you want. You can never turn this around. And I'm here to tell you that you absolutely can. They can have 100 flying monkeys, a whole army of people outside. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what happens in that negotiating room. And when you go in to mediate your case, or you go in front of a judge, they're not going to have all these flying monkeys in there unless they want to parade 100 witnesses in there. But you can also parade witnesses in, and trial gets expensive. So I do highly recommend that you try to have enough leverage that you can use in settlement discussions. But even if I've seen cases settle at lunchtime at trial. So even if you have to wait to use your leverage until you get to trial, you can still definitely turn it around. Never think that it's too late for you. Always try to turn it around as much as you possibly can. So I just want to check out a couple more of your comments. Catherine says you're awesome. Thank you, Catherine. I think you are so awesome too, and I'm so glad that you're here. So, all right. Well, very similar to Scientology. I mean, it is a form of brainwashing, if that's what you mean as far as the Scientology. I mean, I don't know that much about Scientology, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm besmirching Scientology, but I'm assuming that that's what you are saying. I mean, it is a form of brainwashing what they do, because they are trying to get some form of control over you. So John says, explain supply. I am going to explain narcissistic supply in one of my next ones of these, but just very briefly, I'll just say that narcissistic supply is anything that feeds the narcissist's ego. So it could be money, compliments, it could be exerting control, devaluing, judging, debasing people, putting them down, all that sort of thing. Anything that feeds the narcissist's ego. So that's my explanation today about flying monkeys. Beware of flying monkeys. Beware of flying monkeys everywhere, especially on social media and places where, even if you've blocked your ex on your social media accounts, beware of the flying monkey minions who are out there lurking about, watching what you're doing. And also be careful about who you're talking about the narcissist to, because they have spies everywhere. So, and remember that everything you do or say could potentially be a trial exhibit. So you want to be super careful about making sure that you're the one if you end up in front of a judge wearing the white hat and the other
narcissist is the one that has all the issues. Today, we are tackling 4 ways that narcissists make you look like the abuser. And more importantly, what can you do about it? So first of all, why do narcissists do this sort of thing? Well, they do this sort of thing because when you go into the discard phase of a relationship, which is the last phase of a relationship, and if you want to know more about the discard phase of a relationship, I have a whole video on the discard phase specifically of a narcissistic relationship, and you can definitely check that out. But when you go into that, this is when you see the birth of the smear campaign. This is when you become public enemy number 1. They see things in black and white. You either have to be for them or against them. It can't be this amicable thing. And by the way, even if they say, oh, I want it to be amicable and we can do this ourselves and all of that sort of thing, do not believe them. Do not buy into it, because what's going to happen is they're going to be way ahead of you. And by the way, they're going to get you to agree to all sorts of things, and they're going to try to hold you to those agreements. And then they're not going to hold themselves to any of those agreements. Okay. So don't buy into any of that. And the other thing that happens is that you end up saying, oh, I'll give you blah, 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 thinking it's going to garner some sort of favor with them. And it doesn't. Like, they just take it, they think that they're entitled to it or something, and it just goes into the wind and forgotten. And you're over there going, hey, I gave you all this stuff, and they don't think of it as anything fantastic or at all. I was supposed to have that or whatever. And you don't end up getting any kind of credit for any of that. So don't bother. It doesn't help you. The only thing it does is actually hurt you, because you gave up a lot of your leverage in the long run. Just don't do any of that sort of thing. So going back to the 4 ways that the narcissist makes you look like the abuser and what you can do about it. So what they will do is they'll do things like, number 1, send you texts or emails that make you look like they accused you of abuse or affairs constantly, and then try to use the emails that they sent you in court. Or they'll take parts of emails and texts. It's like, this is all still part of number 1. They take these parts of emails or texts and they try to fashion them or manipulate them in some way to make it look like that was abuse or an affair or something like that. What you can do about it is, first of all, texting is not good, because texting is something that can easily be manipulated. And that's why I do prefer email, because email is much harder to manipulate than texts. Emails do have a time and date stamp on them, much easier to see the chain on it. Text is much harder. Or use a court-approved app if you do have children. But that's one of the things that they will do. They'll send you something that accuses you. I can't believe you said that, did that, pushed me, that sort of thing. So that's number 1. Number 2 is they will start planting seeds with their flying monkeys long before you even realize that there's going to be a breakup happening. So they'll start telling their little flying monkeys, their little minions, long before that, oh, he was abusive to me, he said this to me, she said this to me, and this is business related or personal, by the way. And they'll use the word abuse. Even if it wasn't abusive, they'll use the word abuse. Even if, let's say they pushed you down, they did all this stuff, and all you did was like get them off of you. They'll say, he restrained me, he wouldn't let me go. They'll totally turn it around so that you were the attacker, you were the abuser,
They'll make it look like they're the victim. They are enduring this. You don't even realize that they've been telling people these things, maybe even for months, maybe even for years. And so all of a sudden, after the relationship is done, you realize that all these people think that you are abusive or either emotionally, physically, or whatever. Okay. I do have a whole video on how to shut down a narcissist smear campaign, and you might want to check that out. I highly recommend that you check that out. And right now, I just want you to put shut them down in the comments so that you can just start mentally getting yourself ready. Shut them down. Okay. Because you can, you absolutely can. I've helped thousands of people personally, millions of people through this channel. You can do it too. First thing you have to do is believe that you can. No one can help you if you don't believe that you can. All right. You got this. Number 3 thing that they do is they'll start yelling. They'll start screaming. They'll start even calling things out. They'll start doing all kinds of things to seem super dramatic, even if you are super calm, because they want to make it seem like there's something major happening. They may even call the cops first. You know, they may even call cops and get them involved and say that you were the aggressor and make it seem like there was something horrible happening, even if they were the aggressor first. They may call the police, get the police involved, even if they were the first aggressor, and say that you were, and file a police report, even if they were the first aggressor, and say that you were. They may point to scratches on their arm and all that sort of thing, because even if it was you defending yourself, they'll make it seem like you were the one who was the problem. I do have a whole video. It's called Do This to Not React to Narcissists. I would definitely check that out as well. And, you know, make sure that you keep really, really careful records of absolutely everything. Super important. You know, in my SLAY program, I actually have the 12 areas that you should be documenting, and I teach people how to do that. You know, whether it's a business situation or a personal situation, I actually have a whole module on how to document properly. But if you are just doing it on your own, make sure you're just keeping really, really careful records. Okay. The next thing that they will do, the 4th thing that they will do to make you look like the abuser is they will actually file false pleadings, fraudulent pleadings. They will lie. They will straight up, bald face, no problemo, lie in court. Yeah, they will write it out, give it to their lawyer. Their lawyer will write it up for them, file it in the court, sit there and lie in court. Don't get too concerned about all of that when that happens. I know some people get really freaked out when that happens. It is something that's deeply upsetting when that happens. They do have to prove it, but you know, there you are on the defensive. One of the things I want you to do is watch my video, stop defending yourself, do this instead. If they are writing you emails that you want to defend yourself on, you know, just write, I'm in receipt of your correspondence. I deny your allegations, you know, whatever. You don't need to respond point by point by point by point, because that's just, then they pull you in and then now you're stuck in the mud with them, and that's what they want you to do. Don't get drawn in, because then they're like leading you by the nose and they get supply from that. Don't allow yourself to be emotionally triggered by them. That is exactly what they want. You know, they want you to be emotionally triggered by them. They get off on that. That gives them a high. And remember that anything that you put your hand to is a potential trial exhibit. Just remember that. Just remember that when you get emotional and they get you yelling, they get you screaming, they get you upset, they
get you hitting back, or they get you verbally assaulting them back, and all of that sort of thing, it also goes against you. And that's what they want. I mean, because then judges and the police, they just see two people who are fighting. They just see two people who can't handle themselves. They just see two people who are emotional. And that's not what you want. You want to be the one who's wearing the white hat. You want to be the one that's like, they're the aggressor, they are the abuser, they are the ones that are crazy. They try to goad you, they try to trigger you, they try to get you upset, they try to trigger you. They do everything they can to get under your skin, because they do want you to look like the abuser. They do want you to look like the crazy one. And I mean, I've seen guys, they show up with their video equipment and their camera equipment for visits, to try to make the other person get upset or whatever, and do whatever they can. I mean, all kinds of crazy, stupid stuff to get the other person triggered. And don't take the bait. Do not take the bait when they do these things. Just stay the course, pretend like you're reporting the news. Don't allow yourself to get sucked into the mud with them, because if you do, then they have you. So stay away from that, stay on the outside of that, and keep your records. Slay methodology absolutely does work. That's what you have to do in order to beat them, in order to win. So let's talk about when that narcissist just will not let you go. How do you get them to stop? Well, first of all, don't panic. We can get them to let you go. We can get them to do that. You're trying to shake them off. It's like, get off me, right? Get off me. You want to cut off that source of supply. I have been there, by the way, not in a romantic situation. It was a business situation for me. And I mean, once they've attached themselves to that source, that host, they're like a parasite or a leech, and they've got themselves a good source of supply there. They do not want to let it go. And I had that situation myself, and it was very, very difficult to, shake that. I had to do it, and I got it done, and you can get it done too. But you basically have to let the narcissist know that there ain't no more source over here. You got to go get it somewhere else. Supply is their lifeblood. It's their food. It's their oxygen. Remember, they didn't attach themselves to you because you had so little value, even though they've been devaluing you for so long. That's like the great big wool that they've been pulling over your eyes all this time. Really, they attached themselves to you because you were a great source of supply to them. They don't want to let that go so easily. They really need all the forms of supply that they can potentially keep their hands on. So they're not going to let it go very easily. So really what you're trying to do here is let them know that there's nothing here for you anymore. This cupboard is bare. You're going to have to go find it somewhere else. So how do you start doing that? You have to slowly shift the conditioning, because what happened at the beginning of this relationship is they conditioned you and you allowed yourself to be conditioned. And so this dynamic was set up where you became a good source of supply to them in whatever way the relationship began, whether it was a business relationship or a personal relationship. Believe me, I know, because I was in a business relationship with one. And so I became a source of supply for this person, thinking I was going to be a good person, and I was going to show this person how kind I was and how generous I was, and actually how much value I could bring to the relationship. And the more value I brought, the more supply I brought, And the more that person was like, oh yeah, I'm never letting this one go, even though they devalued and passive aggressive and horrible, all of that stuff. And you think, why would I ever want to stay in a relationship where this person was so terrible? But I digress. Anyway, so you need to shift that conditioning because they think that you're not going to leave, or they think that if they act a certain way that they're going to be able to pull you back in. If they act up, if they start maybe having a rage or devaluing you in some way or having a tantrum, that they'll be able to pull you back in. So you're going to have to become immune to those things and be okay with the fact that they're going to do what they did to try to get you back when you start to cut off that source of supply. Okay, so number one, first, stop being triggered. Stop being triggered. Do not show emotion. Any emotion that you show is going to give them supply. So when the texts come in, when the emails come in, when you have those conversations, when you have those interactions, no emotion, right? And by the way, I have a whole video on how to respond to text messages. So you should definitely check that out. It's really good. Really good. I give you lots of very specific text responses and how to respond. It's really super good. So definitely check that out. So wherever you are, don't get defensive, no explanations, just the facts, almost like you're reporting the news, like you're a robot almost. And if you need to go scream and cry or do whatever you want to do after you're out of the interaction, fine, but not while you're there. No emotion. Do not get triggered. Do not show them you are triggered. That gives them supply. That is what they want. They get off on that. They're trying to get a rise out of you. You do not show them that emotion. That's number one. Remember, just the facts. So I want you to write in the comments below to remind yourself, just the facts. I want to see that you wrote that, just the facts, so that I know that you remember just the facts, right? That's number one. Number two is try to winnow yourself down to one form of communication. One form of communication. Try to make it email, just so that you're starting to get yourself to a place where you are putting yourself in a position to start pulling back. You're pulling back. You're starting to get this person out of your life. You want to get to a point where you're no longer in each other's lives at all. You can wipe this person from the CPU of your life, where like they never existed at all, if possible. I know if you have children together, it's difficult. But if you can get down to one form of communication, email is best because those are the best for potential trial exhibits. If you do have potential court, email is best. But one line of communication would be really the best, one form. That's second. And third is firm boundaries, really, really firm boundaries. Cut off looking at their social media. Maybe if you have to meet with them, have a specific agenda. I'm going to meet with you for 30 minutes and this is going to be the conversation we're going to have. That's it. Nothing more. I got to be out of here. We're going to talk about this topic. That's it. I'm out of here. Very, very specific. Keep the boundaries firm so that you can keep your mental health strong. Stay away from the toxic fumes. So that's third. And really, really be super vigilant about it, because this is how you are going to start starving them of this narcissistic supply. They need to have the supply. They need to have this stuff that's going to feed their ego. So if they're not going to get it from you, they will go find it from somewhere else. That's fine. Let them go find it from somewhere else. Let them know that this is no longer the place, that this store is closed, that this factory is closed, that this is no longer the place that they can get it. So they'll slither down the road and they'll go find it somewhere else. Okay. So that is what you do when the narcissist will not let you go. That is how you cut off that source of supply. Do not panic, because that triggers them, and that's where you start to see the little DMs start popping up into your little inbox. They start to realize, oh, there's still something there. You don't want that. Okay. You want to be firm. So no emotions, one line of communication, firm boundaries. Got it? You created for healing. And I wanted to go through it because I think it's really genius what you've put together. And if people use it in, working with you or somebody from your team, you actually say that they can see results within 12 weeks.
The mind map is designed to take place in 10 sessions.
10 sessions. I thought
10 sessions, and then there's usually a little bit of follow-up, so you're not wrong with the 12 weeks. Sometimes I like to spread it out so that they recontact me a couple of weeks after the 10 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks later. So in essence, the mind map is a from, through, to model. From the past and the encodings of the past, through dismantling the here and now and the effects on the psyche, to healing, reconnecting, and paradigm shifting out of the mess. So that's the game plan. Takes place in 10 sessions. Unlike traditional therapy, the sessions are very specific. So session number 1, no mystery. We're going to talk about childhood wounds and how the individual was wounded by the blueprint, mom, dad. I call it the cause. Mom and dad are the cause. Now I want to distinguish cause from fault because this is multi-generational. So it's important to know that the parents also psychologically inherited their bad blueprint and passed it along to the people, to us, everybody, multi-generationally, because nobody comes out of childhood wound-free. It's just impossible. And so we've got to locate it at that level. So the 5 childhood wounds are physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, neglect, and control smothering. And these wounds affect people in different ways. So by going back into that area and discovering who done it, what happened, and what age, people then have an idea of why they're feeling what they're feeling. And then we have to go back into the amygdala, which is the reaction to the wounds, because all of this material is unconscious. And that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is not enough, because it merely addresses the cognitions, which are the conscious messages that we store in panel 3, which are the encodings. But what is often missed is the pre-verbal, the unconscious material, which is what the baby is absorbing, and the subtle messages that they're incorporating into the fiber of their being. So if a mother neglects the child, or the child is not mirrored or attuned to them, the child may go inward because it doesn't have the ability to call themselves out, because that's the parent's job. So imagine the messages going on here, not cognitive, but definitely received. I'm not lovable, I'm not wanted, I'm not important, I don't matter, I'm not effectual, there's this hopelessness, I'm uncomfortable. The amygdala is reacting because there are no words here, so the baby's crying, the baby is having stomach aches and muscle tension, and then eventually learned helplessness. Martin Seligman, learned helplessness. The baby realizes that he or she has no agency in the world. So now I'm on panel 3. So now the encoding is, I'm powerless. I have no meaning in life. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. These are the lies that we have to identify, because what happens in childhood is the baby will identify with how the parents see them, because we see ourselves in the eyes of our mothers and fathers. That's how we self-define. And if we don't have a very good mirror that we're staring at, we're in trouble. So then this sets the person up for what I call the WTF, or the what the Freud. Okay, so here comes a partner, let's say. And that partner is somebody that reminds them of the injury of not mattering. And at first, they feel that they've conquered the not mattering part because they're being love bombed. Wow, finally, somebody thinks I'm mattering. And so I think I'll pair myself with this individual. And pretty soon, those little crumbs of mattering become very, very intermittent. And as we know, intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful reinforcement schedule of all, because if I receive a crumb, wow, that's really special, as opposed to lots of regular reinforcements and what I call is a secure attachment, because people who are injured are used to insecure attachment. And so by conquering the person that treats them like mom or dad, they're going back into the repetition principle, and they're trying to win the game that they didn't win then, and they'll never win this round. And then they go down into chaos because they get re-triggered, and then they try to defend themselves. And this is where the drug, sex, rock and roll comes in, and whatever else they do. Some people cut themselves, some people just simply
This is self-flagellation.
yeah, they opt out of life. Some people defend by watching porn or being on the cell phone all day, and there's just so many creative ways that people defend themselves. And at the end of that game, they break down. There's that blowout. There's that final, the final discard, or the final breakdown where they're suicidal or they're homicidal. This could be an explode also. It doesn't have to necessarily be an implode. So what do we do when we can't hold our feelings? We're either imploding and destroying ourselves, or we're projecting and exploding onto other people.
And a lot of people are just stuck in there, stuck in that level, and they never get. So I just want to kind of to give people a picture of what you're describing. You have this mind map, and we're going to go ahead and make sure we show it on the video. But for the people who are listening versus on the podcast, I want to just kind of give them a visual. It's 9 boxes. Is her mind map, and so just picture 9 boxes, kind of like a Brady Bunch sort of look, and the top row is your past, and that's where you talk about your wound, reaction, and encoding, which you just described, and that middle row is your current, your where you are now, and that's your chaos, your defenses, and your breakdown or breakthrough.
Correct.
And then you take people through each one of these things, so that they have to actually spend time understanding what their wounds are, how they've reacted to them, what their encoding is. Like you actually take them through this so they understand how they ended up where they are today. And then now we're getting into the third row, which is the last 3 boxes, which is your paradigm shift, your healing, and unity. So why don't we go through those? So they've gone to their breakdown and breakthrough, and so now.
I just want to back up for a moment to the breakdown, breakthrough.
Sure.
The breakthrough is actually the release of the psychological toxins. It's very important that they get in touch with the cause and hold energetically responsible the injurers. And we do that through a series of truth conversations. And in the truth conversations, they get to actually express all the range of emotions that they were not able to express to their primary caregivers, usually mother or father. Now, please know, audience, that I'm not advising people to call mommy or daddy and give them a lowdown of what they did to you. This is something that would re-injure the person, because if you're dealing with narcissistic parents, they don't have the empathy to heal. The herder can't be the healer. So it's a bad choice to call your parents and try to work this through with them. So what we do is we work it out in the therapeutic environment so that they get to release these toxins, reprocess everything, identify the lies as opposed to identify with the lies. And then they can start moving into the paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is where they are now aware of their cracked lens of perception, which is all the lies and the patterns that they bought into, and now they're seeing clearly. Their boundaries are more defined, and I refer to the biological model of the permeable and the non-permeable and the semi-permeable model. The permeable is more of the borderline features where people don't have the boundaries and they can't set limits and they don't have the self-esteem. And then the non-permeable are more the narcissists and the paranoids, they're walled off. And then the semi-permeable are the people who are able to vet who can come into their inner circle or their medium circle. They can vet what's healthy for them, what's not healthy for them. And then they can choose appropriate growth partners. They could choose synergistic partners, because it then becomes not a 1 + 1 is less than 2 or even less than 1 formula, which is the vampiring effect. It becomes a new game of life where the 1 + 1 is now a greater than 2. It's a synergistic effect. So now people are taught to pair with growth partners, whether they be business partners or marital partners or friendship partners, relationship partners, doesn't matter. It's the 1 + 1 is greater than 2 phenomenon, and that's the new game of life. And then they get to encode what is going to support that particular system gone right. Because remember, we're turning the system gone wrong around 180 degrees, and now the encoding becomes, well, what are you putting in your mouth? Is that evolving you, or is that devolving you? Is that friendship evolving you, or is that friendship demeaning, devaluing, and destroying you? Is that choice in education authentic to you? Do you really want to become an attorney or a psychologist, or what is authentic to you? So this is where it becomes real, where people are choosing and encoding, and now they are, quote, the cause of part 2 of their life. And now they're able to basically construct their own world. Who do you want in your world? What kind of food do you want to eat? What kind of people are enhancing you? What kind of colors do you want to surround yourself with?
Well, and I would even add to that is, like, I call it your inner head trash, that little idiot that lives inside of your brain that says you're not good enough in some way. When I was kind of dealing with this whole paradigm shift myself years ago,
Yeah.
I had to like retrain my brain, like, who's having that thought? Is it the idiot, or is it the person that I'm creating myself to be?
Correct.
Is it the new person? And distinguishing where that old thought pattern is actually coming from, and if it's true, look for evidence in reality. Is it true? Most of us, I think, have this syndrome that, and it's kind of cliche, but it's true, that if you did a talk in front of 100 people in the room, and 99% of them said you were amazing and it was the best talk they ever heard,
right,
and one person says you sucked, you're going to go home and think about the one person who said you sucked the whole entire time.
And so this is the difference between cognitive behavioral therapy and affirmations. We're actually dismantling panel 3. So the very thing that triggered the individual, I don't matter, I suck, I'm stupid, I'm incompetent, I'm never going to be good enough, all of that stuff gets literally dismantled, and it's pinned back to the cause. It goes back to the cause. This is not the message. this is not my message. This is a message that was blueprinted. It's inauthentic. It's based on a lie. We're releasing the emotional toxicity. So if a person with narcissistic personality dynamics comes along and demeans or devalues, tries to destroy, that panel 3 is now no longer active. We have dismantled the bomb so they can press and press and press as much as they want and no reaction. And that's how you step out of the game of dancing with the narcissist. You dismantle the whole system. And so they walk away because it's not interesting to you anymore. You don't beg and plead that they see you differently, or no, I'm not stupid. No, I'm not ugly. Come on. Don't you think I'm beautiful? Please love me. So that whole game is shot. So
Because you
nothing
already know
forward.
that you have internal value.
Yeah.
You know, you've created that internal feeling. I mean, we all are inherently valuable. We just don't feel it.
Right. And so it's really a matter of dismantling something that people are very unconscious of. They've been set up to do this. It's sort of like kind of like a grooming. They've been groomed to think this way. They've been groomed to be taken advantage of. And once you shine the truth light on all these aspects, then it loses its power. It's kind of like the like Dorothy. Once the curtain is pulled back from the wizard, okay, or Toto does it, the truth dog. Toto, the truth dog, pulls back the curtain, and there's this silly old man manipulating the levers, creating this land of Oz, and it's just an illusion. And that's what people get to experience in the process of the mind map system. It's their parents' creation. It's been a multi-generational creation, and it has nothing to do with their authentic self. And once this is exposed, they can start to grow.